surprisingly. And there's a number of agencies where the MD can't sell or close, which I always found rather disturbing. The best structure, I would say, for an agency is, again, agreeing with both these legends of the industry here, is where the MD not only is passionate, but also has a bit of charisma and is well-spoken, well-read, has a very clear vision that is communicated through to the rest of the agency, that the agency sees new business as oxygen, and without it, it's dying. The clients might be the heart, but new business is the lungs, so without it, you're not going to last very long, or you'll have a very slow and painful death. Which I've seen, and there have been some legends in the business that I've worked for that over 10 years, they end up dying. Once you've got a vision, you have to have a very, very clear idea of what you're doing so that you have a great foundation. And too often, a lot of agencies will move into activating and reacting to a great need or desperation for new business without actually building the structure around it. And that's a combination of their assets, how they're seen in the market, what their real hook is that they want to offer to a prospect, who is the ideal prospect, the sweet spot, and so on. And then to really have a built machine that lets you activate it. And the best structure I've found is where it's the MD or the CEO who's leading it. He's got what I call an understudy, which you might describe as a new business director. And then you've got the person doing a lot of the legs, often the person making the calls, setting the meetings, and all the rest of it. And then you've got to maintain it. So it's running it, it's maintaining it, seeing what works, what doesn't. And if you do all of this well, you can be one of those very fortunate agencies that can decide to pitch or not to pitch, that has such a healthy pipeline of profitable, long-term clients coming through, that when a pitch comes, you don't have to pitch and go, right, I might have a 20-25% chance of winning. Who wants to? I think we're one of the only industries that will accept that we'll have a 70 to 80% lose rate. Any other industry, we'd all be fired. So, that's probably the structure I'd say works best. Two great points. There's a saying I have, which is, the best people in the agency work really hard on the client's business, but equally hard avoiding working on the agency's business. A lot of time, the people who are put on new business are the ones that are available that, AKA, got taken off a client. It's not uncommon for a new business role to be the road to retrenchment.
Right.
You just wonder
the wrong
sometimes.
attitude, really.
Yeah,
Not
completely.
The wrong approach.
Well, I'd first comment on the fact that when you talk about new business, everybody automatically assumes you're talking about a pitch process. And a new business system is not a pitch process. And if you do new business well, the pitch process becomes a very small point. In terms of costs, a very basic idea would be 10 to 15% of your turnover should be spent on new business, and that includes your pitching. So it really should be divided up between the new business machine, your marketing activities, and getting all your assets ready. I've got many stories where an agency's website is so woeful that they lost a pitch just because the user experience was so bad, by their own site. Then you also need to make sure that you've got your PR and your profile out there. And then you decide, what you're going to spend on pitching. It's not uncommon for it to take 12 to 18 months to recoup the cost of pitching. So I think that has to be looked at. You can, by saying no to one pitch, you don't have a 70 or 80% chance of winning. That can actually fund so much more of an outgoing, proactive leadership, new business type of structure. We're very reactive. So often, people hope they're going to be invited to pitch, and hope is not a sustainable or logical new business structure. So if we're proactively looking at the sweet spot of who we want and figuring out great conversations we can have to engage them and wanting to work with us with a project, as you rightly said, once you've got a crack in the wall, then it's your job to just make it bigger. And if they end up, pitching at the end, you've got a relationship with them. They've trusted you. The check's cleared. So you're in a good spot. I'd add to that the BRW Innovation Company. I think in terms of our industry awards, just an aside, I rarely find that agencies are reading all the publications that their clients are reading. I also think They assume clients are reading our publications, and it's not exactly the top on the list. If it is, it's usually somebody who's middle management or lower management, but not if you're trying to target the C-suite. That's another issue of who you're targeting. Most agencies target what I call those that get swept, as opposed to the sweepers. In terms of awards, the two in our industry that I find are most relevant are Agency of the Year, but also effectiveness. And the effectiveness are pretty crucial. If you're doing well at those two, you're fine. I also think you have to be careful about how you're positioning yourself as an agency, and I cannot tell you how many agencies for the last 20 years have described themselves as ideas agencies, and you just want to roll your eyes, and clients don't have an ideas budget. They have an advertising budget and a PR budget and a promotions budget, and one client actually knew a client for a prospect for 6 years, and he's like, finally asked her, why don't you give us your business? She goes, well, you're this ideas company. I don't have a budget for that. And he goes, well, we actually do sales promotion. She goes, oh, I've got a huge budget for that. And ended up, being a great client. So I think you've got to be very careful about, the category you enter, so that if you're a direct marketing agency and you've won that 2 years in a row as best DM agency, then you don't want to position yourself a year later as a marketing communication agency that doesn't really mean anything. Cold call. I think we have to look at the definition. New business is not about cold calling and meeting and pitches. New business is about developing relationships of trust with the people you want to work with. And, people might be calling you, which is great, but how many of them are on your top 10 list? And if you've identified your sweet spot and you really know who you want, and you don't know them and they don't know you and they're not looking, you've got very few options of how to start introducing yourself in a smart way. Phone calls, as opposed to cold calls. If a cold caller is calling somebody you don't know, then that's a cold call, and we have to do that. And I think everybody has to be great at cold calling, especially if you run a business. The structure of how you do it, it's sales, it's phone math. It's, if you want to get $2 million in revenue and you've got a 50% close rate, the numbers go up. I always look at, you've got to have the people the top 10 you'd love to have, the loose accounts, the ambulance chasing, and maybe scavenging off of some of the weak agencies in your competitive set. What rarely anybody does is the top 100 list. It's the clients that are ideally suited to your goals and ambitions. You identify, say, the top 3 people within the company that you can have a valid conversation with. That's 300 people that you're having regular quarterly communication of something interesting and relevant that has you leading into having a conversation with them. And each time you're doing a campaign, if you step back a minute, we have to treat ourselves like one of our best clients. And what we're doing is ongoing communication campaign building. So every quarter you're sending or reaching out to them with something interesting and relevant, following up with a phone call that's inviting them to have a meeting, to have a meaningful discussion about how that issue relates to their business and how it might help their goals and ambitions. If you do this over a period of a year or 18 months, within one 12-month period, 15% of those clients will be looking for another agency resource. So they've got a high awareness, they've had a relationship building with you, they've started to have trust. You also have to look at how many meetings you can handle. So is that 1 a week, is that 2 a week, that's 40 meetings? How long does it take you to get to the next meeting and win the business? So cold calling is one tiny part of a much broader ongoing comms campaign that it really shouldn't stop. Your mental inner game is crucial before you even start doing new business. If you're in a desperate spot and you're looking at low-hanging fruit and you've got to close in 3 months, you're pretty much screwed. If you are selling from a place of need and desperation, to the dating analogy, it's like a desperate date. You reek. They can smell you coming. The other way to do it is switch your brain from this, idea of I'm entitled to this client, they're my priority, I should be theirs, they should return my call and my email. You're not their priority, they're yours. And you really have to think about from what you can give, what you can share, as opposed to what you can take. And so often clients are going, the agency just wants my business, but they're not really giving me anything. So it's what can I do for you? What can I give you? These are the headspace that really shift anything that you're doing in new business, so that the clients really see you as genuine and interested and a nice person to work with. I find a much better scenario is where you bring them into your agency. If you've got somebody making calls for your company outside of your office, they can't feel the authenticity of who you are and represent the energy and ethos of what you are. So give them a desk, give them a computer, give them a phone, let them make the calls. They're usually pretty good at self-managing, otherwise they can't be doing what they've done. In terms of, you can use an Excel database for people that are smaller companies. They work just fine. Just make sure you capture everything. I mean, just on a side note, and I know we're not talking about pitching, but so many agencies will go to a pitch, say who they pitched for, and will not even know who all the people were in the room 3 months later. I mean, these are people you almost married, so you should kind of know their name. Salesforce is great because it allows you to manage the campaigns that you're doing. And I think of, every 3 months you're doing a different wave, a different campaign of communicating. I've developed something that's called a hook and a 3-meeting strategy because I realized that a lot of agencies are one-hit wonders and they go in, and I learned this from a guy way back when in New York who was the senior VP of Toys R Us. And he was down in Texas and he said, "Sweetheart, I get a lot of one-hit wonder phone calls. If you call me in 3 months, I'll be very surprised." And I went, right. I was working for Fred Allen Advertising, which had created I Want My MTV, so I think I'm dating myself, but there you go. And what was interesting is we sent something interesting and relevant to him every 3 months for 18 months. On the 6th call that I made, he said, "Right, I know more about your agency than I know about mine. I want your boys to fly down here and meet the board, and I want to talk to you about business." The hook in the 3-meeting strategy is really about you have to understand what is a interesting conversation for you to be having with the prospect that is not about you and your credentials. You have to show that is there something that about their business, either an external perspective of some issue that's coming from outside their business or inside their business because of restructure or rehiring or a new CEO or what have you. The way you find your hook is actually a lot easier than most people think. If you scope out from the work that you've been doing for your clients for like the last 12 to 18 months, you'll start to see a pattern that they all come to you for 1 or 2 main reasons within your field of expertise. They have a similar problem. And what you can hazard a guess is that your prospects, especially your ideal ones, are having the same problem. So you can kind of package this up, if you will, into an interesting conversation where you can say to the prospect to get your first meeting is, we've found this is an issue. These companies, which happen to be your clients, but you don't spook that, are solving it by doing these 3 things. We'd love to come in and talk to you about what they are to see if they're useful for your business and get your thoughts on it. So it's very much a conversation. Don't bring out the laptop. The minute your screen goes up, they become an audience, you're presenting. Don't present, talk to them. Be able to talk to them in your first meeting for 20 minutes, and if it goes longer, it's because they're asking questions. If they're asking questions, they're buying. You have to know before you even make a phone call to get that first meeting what you want to sell them at the end of your 3rd meeting. So the 3-meeting strategy is that you can go from a cold prospect to a paid piece of project within 3 meetings without having to pitch. So the idea at the end is it's about productizing your service. What's a project that you can come up with? What's a way that you can package up what you do in a simple way that's easy to buy so that you know what that toolbox is going to be? It's going to be several different tools that you might be able to bring out. The first meeting is the most important one because you're doing a couple of things simultaneously, and this is where your agility needs to be at the highest level. So you're delivering your hook that got you in the room, because if you don't deliver that, then you're kind of making it up on the phone. You're also doing fact-finding. What are their problems? What are their issues? What are they looking for? What's the perfect world? And you're also qualifying them. I'm a big fan that you cannot qualify people before you have your face-to-face, because I've heard a million times, we're happy with our agency, we're not talking to anyone, and I've got business out of, we can't talk to another agency a million times. I think the other perspective is don't try to be a replacement, try to be an addition. And that's how you get your projects, because the project you're discussing with them in that fact-finding first meeting that will eventually be something you co-create in the second meeting to be a brief and a project with them is what you close and sell at the 3rd meeting. So it's really quite a structured thing. I work with a lot of small agencies, you know, everyone from a one-man band that is, you know, a kitchen table to the multinationals with 10,000 staff. And for smaller agencies, you just do the same thing, you just put it down a scale. So you have to have, if nothing else, one thing I tell clients to do is 3 by 3. Make 3 calls at 3 o'clock every day. And it doesn't matter whether you get through, always leave a message, and you'll find that at the end of the week, that's 15 calls, at the end of the month, that's 60, and some of them are gonna call you back, some of them won't. And the fact that you're constantly going through, it just keeps the energy going. To your point about the fact that when you've got new energy, new business energy happening, your focus is here, but the calls will come from left field. And it's all part of the new business energy that you've activated. In terms of the staff to hire, you can hire a dedicated new business person who comes in 4 hours a week. It doesn't have to be a full-time person. It can be a weekly ongoing thing. Because in Australia, you know, if you call somebody more than once a week, they're going to shoot you. Because for the client, once a week is like a day in our world. A month for them is a week in our world. So you have to have both what I call perseverance. It's patience as well as persistence. You know, realize that it's going to take you a year to 18 months to get a client. Don't be in a hurry, because that comes off with your desperation. In terms of when you give up on a client, I think if you've got a well-qualified prospect list where everybody is an ideal client. I mean, if you have 100 prospects, you've got your A list, your B list, your C list. If they're an A list, you never give up on them. I mean, you don't give the farm away, but you don't do work for free. You have some standards about what you will and won't do, but your first meeting will qualify it, so you know how much to invest, what's your level of effort versus your level of return. And sometimes I find that the people you started talking to are gone in 18 months, so it's almost like a whole new relationship, which is why you have to have more than one person within the company that you're talking to. I mean, another thing I find is that agencies are always talking to marketers, and there's some great reasons if you have a relevant hook to talk to the CFO, to talk to the guys who's heads up sales, to you know, talk to the CEO of the second tier type of organizations. And also organic growth of your existing clients is really the flip side of the same coin of new business with new clients and cold prospects. It should be seen in the same basket. Rarely do I find that agencies are having regular, interesting conversations with the CEOs and the CFOs of their clients. So if you're not having those, how can you have that with, you know, the clients that you want to be working with? It's the A team working on new business, not on pitching, and I'm just going to clarify that because it's different thinking. Your A team is the one who goes into the first meeting. Once they come back and they've got all that information, they've qualified the client, they know the issues, you're co-creating what that brief could be to get the project, then you've got your B team. And the B team are who's going to work on the business. And they're only brought in when there's actually something worth them spinning their wheels to kind of grab. The A team should, in the best scenario, be solely new business people. Because I tell you, if you've got one person working on a client and new business, the client always wins out. The new business always gets on the back burner, and you get this stop-start new business mentality that's the death blow. So it's better to do a 5% gradation of do a little bit that you can maintain, as William said, to, okay, let's go hell for leather. Okay, we've got all these clients, we can't take on any new business, we can't even settle in the clients we've won. So it's really got to be a structured, dynamic inflow so that you can manage both simultaneously without one choking the other. Does that help?
Well, don't have a B team is a good idea. Well, don't tell them anyway.
I don't mean in skill. I mean in, you know, like for the creative director, I always hold off the creative director as part of the B team because he's that, you know, fantastic guy that you got to be worthy of meeting him. So the B team isn't lower on skill. It's just that you don't get to meet the people that you're going to work with until we know you're worth working for. You know, you go between abdicating and delegating. And I think a good MD delegates where they're involved 30% of the time. Up front, the 10%, 10% in the middle just to check everything's on track, and another 10% right at the end. If you're doing that, then you're letting your team, whoever that is for whatever part, whether it's existing business or new business, run and have the belief that you believe in them, as opposed to so often, especially in pitches, 11th hour, MD comes in and says, it's all shit, we're working till 3 in the morning, we're redoing everything, and everybody hates him, and they don't want to win the business. I think the receptionist and you've got to love that executive assistant. I mean, so often, especially on C-suite, you know, she's trained 4 or 5 CEOs going through that place, so she's really running the place at a certain point. In terms of how you get through reception. You give them enough information, but not too much. And you actually, it's your tone. You know, you have to act like you know what you're talking about. And it's not her place to sit here and filter you out because it's her job. Now, on the flip side of that, you have to understand there's some very, very strict policies that they have about they can't give out names, they can't give out titles, they can't confirm any information. And so you have to go, oh gosh, I really appreciate your policies. What I'm trying to do is just confirm the email I have. Are you giving something out if I just tell you what I have? But you've guessed what the email is because you know somebody else's email. So you're going, all right, first name dot last name at so-and-so, you know? I think also if you say just very strongly, I want to speak to John Doe, can you put me through? They go, oh, I'm sorry, we're not allowed to. He's an executive manager. You go, okay, how about his EA? And you go, oh, yes, I'll put you through. Great. Can you tell me who she is? And then so when Sue answers, you go, oh, hi, Sue. I just wanted to send something to John. Can I send that to you so that you could pass that on to him? So you involve them in part of the process. You're incredibly polite. I mean, I think there's a big, another session on, manners. And in new business, I see some rather extraordinary things go on that you're just going, you're kidding me. You're trying to get their business and you're acting like that. Be very nice, very polite, very patient. If you're in a bad mood, don't pick up the phone. If you're stressed for business, don't go have a meeting. I mean, you just will, the old saying is true, you've got one chance to make a good first impression. On the phone, you have 4 seconds to make a good first impression. In person, you have a quarter of a second. And this is all subconscious NLP stuff. So, dress for it.